Okay, you're live, you're recording.
Okay.
So,
Few more people responded to the invite, but it's 5 after, so we'll just get started. Thanks everyone for joining. This is a workshop with our PR agency, Camp Stories. Camp Stories joined the Moab Office of Tourism in July of this year and hit the ground running last year. Last year. And hit the ground running. We're going to review 2025 results and the plan for 2026, as well as just kind of do some explaining about what they're working on, how all of this works. So a little bit of an orientation of how they support the office. So we can ask questions throughout. And this is scheduled for 2 hours. But we don't think we'll take all of that time, so we'll end when we end, and then pick back up with the board meeting.
Yeah, thank you, Mick.
Yeah. So without further ado, we turn it over to Camp Stories. This is Canada, Camp Stories, and Courtney and Alisa.
Hi, everybody. As Mick mentioned, we would love to, if you guys have questions or you want to go deeper into anything in particular, this is a great opportunity to do so. I think Mick kind of alluded to this as well, but it's a great kind of chance to look behind the curtain of how PR works, how we garner stories, the trends that we look at, the interviews we conduct, and ultimately how we make some of these earned stories come to life. I'm Campbell. I know I've met, I think everybody. I can't see the room completely, but we're happy to present a little bit today. I co-lead the Camp Stories team. Court?
Hi, everyone. Courtney Howsam. Also leading brand strategy for Camp Stories. We really focus on telling really amazing, important, layered stories about Moab to help local businesses, support the community, and also encourage visitation to help prop up the economy. And so, like Campbell mentioned, this is, I think, a really good chance for us to share what this practice looks like, how we have relationships with media and what earned media really is, and then how we are able to essentially land coverage, and then also how we organize it from a messaging standpoint and some of those key messaging and pillars that we want to transcend through everything, all the stories that we're telling.
Hi, everyone. I'm Alitza. I'm based in the greater Seattle area, representing Moab on the Camp Stories team. I'm an account supervisor, and I handle a lot of the media relations and account management. And if you have any inquiries that are ever sent your direction for media, please pass them over to me, and we'll vet them and go forward accordingly. But just wanted to put that on your radar, too, as we jump into this. So we wanted to provide a really high-level overview of what PR is. I feel like a lot of people hear PR or they know, the PR crisis terminology, but we wanted to show you just a little bit more of what we do. So we use the terminology earned media in public relations, which is really just media that's coming out from a more organic way. Advertisement and marketing have dollars that go behind it. Whereas earned media is more so telling a story through a third-party person, like a journalist or an influencer, or even just the public, discussing amongst each other and it creating some sort of buzz around the destination. So we've included some PR methods here. Media relations is a really big one. That's where we really specialize, getting those big feature stories and telling Moab's story in national placements. But we also get involved with brand storytelling, reputation management, thought leadership, so really amplifying the voices of Moab. Influencer and partnerships are great ways to build up media attention too, as social media continues to rise in attention. And then events and activation. And we'll go more into these throughout this presentation, but those are just some of the methods of public relations.
And Alisa, I'll just note quickly, this office hasn't had PR representation in the past, so this is a new way to tell the Moab story. And just to be clear, we aren't paying for these stories, right? So this team interacts with journalists, and I'm sure they'll go into this more, but it's for editorial, so unpaid storytelling in publications.
Yeah, and it's a good point, Mick. It's I think an important component to that is while we have control over a lot of the messaging and sort of the characters within Earn for First narrative-led stories, there are some things that we don't have control of because it is editorial. And so some of it is connecting people to sources and letting them shine and tell their stories. But that is an important sort of differentiator between earned and paid media as well. What we focus on, as Alyssa had mentioned, Earn for First narrative-led stories. A lot of these are really character-inspired stories. And as you guys have seen, and you've talked to community members around Moab, we've conducted interviews with quite a few people from an official standpoint and then from an unofficial standpoint when we've been in town as well. This is what leads us to the big, deep stories that focus on Moab. We focus on emotional connection to the place. A lot of stories focus on bucket list checking. While bucket list travel is great, it doesn't form that emotional connection a lot of times that you get when you become enamored with somebody who is representative of a place. So example of that is you read a story about somebody who has shaped their surroundings, or their surroundings have been shaped by that person. People read that story and they seek out that place because of that person. I want to go to Moab because I read about this incredible person, Rebecca McAllister, who has this shop. She's brought together all these makers in town. I want to go there and see this place because of this person. And so we find that when we create this emotional connection between the place and people, people really seek out the place. Selective short lead moments that reinforce the core narrative as well is part of this. We work in 3 different timelines, which I think is really important as well to think in terms of how we're placing stories. We think in short lead, mid lead, and long lead. Long lead is typically 6 to 8 months in advance. And so a good example of that is when you read stories about like where to go in 2026 or big print narrative features, they're thinking about those stories at a totally different season than when those come out. Short lead stories are typically very like news oriented. I had mentioned before we started today that we're working on a bunch of e-bike stories right now. E-bikes, of course, will be legal on March 1st. We're working with a few major dailies on stories that will cover that. They're working within a few weeks of the deadline. And so when we're reaching out, Alyssa's been in touch with a number of you with regard to like what's new, what's going on in the destination. That's typically looking at things that are very long lead. Media hosting philosophy as well. We're very selective with media trips. We have quite a few people that come to us and that we pitch on media trips. We cannot host everybody, of course. And so we're making sure that the people that we do ultimately decide to host in the destination are people that have an incredible track record. We look at anybody that comes to the destination who is a member of the media is essentially a mirror of ourselves. And so a deep respect for the people, the places in Moab, and somebody that we know is going to deliver an incredible narrative about the place. We also do small intentional groups. When we do group fams, most of the people, the media that we've had visit Moab have come individually. Historically in PR, some organizations will bring groups of people ranging from 3 to on up to 10 people to a destination. That has become a bit more antiquated as media seek really intimate experiences. It's very hard when you bring 5 or 6 people to a destination, expect them all to write a story that they're going to get different experiences. And so we focus on really intentional single experience media visits to Moab. The itineraries that we design are also very intentional and very intense in terms of the time that we put into these things. No itinerary is the same. Every single story is totally different. And typically we have characters in Moab in mind for each person that comes to the destination. And so when we do agree to host somebody in the destination, we typically come up with a perfect accommodations fit for them. If they're writing for the Wall Street Journal, it's typically a little bit more high end. We also work with a number of writers who are writing frugal, accessible stories. And so we put them someplace where that makes sense. And so every single component of their visit is sort of shaped by editorially where they're going to place that story. Space for reflection, discovery, and unstructured moments. We try not to pack every itinerary full. One thing that Moab is wonderful for is serendipity. If we pack everything into an itinerary, there's no way that somebody can get that serendipity of, oh, I just discovered this incredible thing here. We know, and everybody in this room knows, that Moab is a place with so many layers. And so we want to give people the opportunity to sort of peel back those layers and discover things for themselves. And then campaignable activation moments is
Campbell?
something. Yes.
Just before you go on, in the earned narrative led and why we do hosting, I like when people think about why we invest in earned media, think about your own consumer habits. If you see an ad, you have a certain reaction to that. Maybe you'll end up purchasing something through that. But earned media is a lot more persuasive in that if you pick up the newspaper and it says, go visit Moab, go do this in Moab, an editorial take on that is much more compelling to a consumer than an ad might be. So these two things, getting the article written is great, and then hosting is kind of how we get there.
And
Yeah. Oh, go ahead, Alyssa.
just to build on to that, a big reason why we host too is the first person narrative that the journalist gets to actually go and experience these things. We oftentimes get journalists that say, I don't write about destination unless I've gone to it, because they want to be able to go to the different restaurants, to go to these outdoor adventures and really see what they're about, rather than doing the research online and, just writing whatever's available on Google as it is to everybody else. They can tell a much deeper story about the destination after they've experienced it. So it's a really big value for what we're doing with them.
Yeah, it's a good point. Ultimately, the people that we are bringing, as Alyssa mentioned, are people who are writing those big feature stories. And Mick is right. Yes, we love advertising and we love branding and campaign moments. A lot of people, you don't open sort of edition of Outside Magazine to look at the advertisements. You read the articles in it, and those typically have an outsized effect on where people go on vacation. It's funny, in Outside, this month, there's a print issue about outsiders, which is they're people that they celebrate that do incredible things in the outdoors. And we confirm one of those outsiders is somebody in Moab, which is pretty exciting, that stems from another feature a few months back. And so we're very excited about that as well. Campaignable active. Oh, go ahead.
We can also note that if we don't engage journalists with this kind of support, they're going to write about us anyway. So without this support, we don't shape the narrative. We don't have access to the journalists. We aren't getting them the sources we want. We aren't feeding them the stories we want them to go after. And so that comes into our office's kind of larger idea of tourism happening to us, as opposed to us leaning in and going after the reputation and the things that we want to be known for.
Yeah. In addition to that, we can also target, I'm sure we'll go into this later on too, but specific flight markets or drive markets or demographics that we want to reach. If we wanted to go for a younger audience, we can target outlets. We really have an opportunity to go after the media that's going to help shape the narrative that we want to tell with Moab. And so that's also another part of it too, is I live in the Seattle area, so I can target the Seattle Times to write about Moab and then get more Seattle traffic down to Moab. So there's a lot of opportunities that with targeted, not national outlets as well, that are really beneficial.
Yeah, we're going to go into sort of how this works. So you guys have sort of an idea of how we pitch these stories and what interests media when we send them pitches. Typically, it starts with a simple poetic hook that ladders into something broader that's happening. And so we'll talk about trends in a minute as well. Seasonal moments that invite return visits. We play a lot with perception in the stories that we tell. A lot of the media, we start by getting them to talk about what their perception of Moab is. What do you think it is? When we started, Mick had mentioned that there was not PR before us. It was really interesting to hear people's perception of Moab. We had some journalists that said, I don't think Moab's for me because I'm not a camper. I want to stay in a hotel. They didn't have this idea that there were a lot of hotels in Moab, or I'm not a hardcore adventurer. And so we actually love when somebody has a perception like that, because it allows us to kind of turn it on its head and give them that aha moment. Like, this is a place for you. It is welcoming for you. And that's where we've had a lot of success with some of the stories we've told as well. And then activations that feel discovered rather than staged. Those are things where, again, playing into that serendipity moment as well.
Yeah, so we went into a lot of this already, and I won't double down too much, but just a little bit more background into how we pitch. So we're really looking for things that are timely and relative. We're constantly tracking travel trends and consumer trends, looking at competitors and what they're doing, who's writing about Moab, what the narrative is out there, and making sure that we're really taking into account what's currently being talked about. So we're not just shooting in the dark with our pitching efforts. This is also a really important time to know why things matter or when things matter when it comes to journalism. If there is no news, they're not going to cover it. So there's a lot of, efforts that we'll talk about of what's new in Moab, which is a big initiative with a story sheet being sent out to kind of draw them in for some of those timely hooks of things that they can bring into their stories. And we're really just making sure that we're pitching in a way that's really intentional and not promotional. Like we were talking about, we're not an advertisement team, we're a PR team, and we're shaping these stories effectively.
Yeah, and I know there's always questions about travel and consumer trends. I think some of the things that we're leaning into right now, and you guys are probably seeing these as well, just in the media that you're consuming, whether it's news media or digital media or print media, nostalgia is something we're seeing in spades right now. Everybody is obsessed with nostalgia. I think right now we're hearing a lot about like grunge rock and the early 90s has come back, and digital detox as well. We're seeing a lot of queries from media where they're looking for resorts where people turn in their phones. We've explained that there's some resorts and places in Moab where you don't have to turn in your phone. The cell reception begets that you don't have it in the first place, which is kind of cool. National parks is something that there's a lot of discussion around. Obviously, things like timed entry, but also just exploring national parks, how to best explore national parks, best national parks from a vehicle, national parks where you can go deeper. And so that's an example of where there's just layers of these things as well. We're also seeing a lot of interest in beating the crowd in over tourism story. We're seeing tons of over tourism stories about Europe, especially as people go to Europe and they sort of flock to popular tourist destinations. And so a lot of people are looking to the antidote for beating the crowds as well. Timelessness, also related to nostalgia, which is kind of interesting. That is a thematic that we play with quite a bit in Moab. While physically there's some things that change, the place really hasn't changed. We have people that go back to Moab, and Ali and I were at IMM a couple weeks ago in New York, which is International Media Marketplace, where we met with 48 different journalists. It's basically speed pitching journalists. We meet with each one for 15 minutes and we pitch a unique story to each one of them. We heard a lot about people who had said, I've been to Moab, but I haven't been in 25 years. What is it like now? And so telling them that the place really hasn't changed physically, it's the same. From a demographic trend standpoint, we're also seeing a lot of people dive into multi-gen travel, couples travel, spring break travel, thematic travel as well. So like festive travel, spring break travel right now, pop culture, food sourcing is a big one as well. And just so when we're sending out queries, or you guys are curious, a lot of times we get back when we send out the what's new. It's like, I don't have anything new. Does it matter if it's not new? Sometimes we're basing that into editors coming back and saying, I'm interested in examining this. And so looking back at that, those are some of the trends that we're seeing right now. Everything we do is hyper tailored. This is a real differentiator of Camp Stories, how we do PR compared to other agencies. A lot of times agencies will come up with a pitch or a story idea and they'll send it out to 100 people. And if 3 or 4 people get back to them, they'll call that a success. We do things the opposite way. We hand select media and outlets first that we think are going to move the needle for Moab, or they're going to tell a story perfectly. If we have a partner in Moab who we want to tell a story about, who is the person or who is the outlet that we feel like is going to do justice through storytelling to that person's journey? I think another component of that as well is most of these stories we can only do once. And so if we don't do justice to it the first time, it's a shame. We feel like we've ruined that opportunity and we can't come back to it. And so it's really important that we're focusing on the perfect person to tell these stories.
Yeah, and a little
Oh,
bit
go
more
ahead,
about
Alyssa.
how we land stories. I mean, we've kind of delved into this already, but and we'll be talking more about it during the strategy. But again, hyper tailored outreach, really compelling stories, and strategic timing. Really going deep into our media relationships. A lot of these relationships we have for decades in some cases, really friendly contacts, people we consider true friends in the media space that we can always pull into these storylines, which is a really great benefit. And then coordinating these first person media experiences for them to come to Moab and experience it firsthand. Interview opportunities if they're interested in talking to key spokespeople around town, and then some of the activations that we'll talk about during this as well.
Just on that note, when you select a PR firm, that's something that you look at. You want somebody with a big Rolodex with relationships that they can tap into so that when a story presents itself, they know who to take it to. If journalists are receiving pitches from people that they don't know, they're not as interested. So this is it's a very social industry, and it really takes a long time to develop these relationships and build that trust.
Yeah, it's a good point. It's funny. Sometimes we ask media, like really A-list media from like the New York Times and Wall Street Journal, how many story ideas or pitches they get a day. And a lot of them report that they get 200 or 300 emails a day. And so there's no way that a journalist can sort through all those. Their job, again, is not to read pitches and story ideas. It's to write incredible stories that serve readers. And so I think that's something as well that we always ask when we pitch is how does this serve the end goal? And the end goal for these people is not necessarily an incredible story about clients. It's about serving their readers. And so a lot of times we put that lens on first is how can I write a pitch? How can I write a story idea that ultimately serves your readers in a way that they're going to go, this is amazing. Ultimately, we want them to come to the destination, but we kind of have to have that dual lens when we're thinking about earned media as opposed to advertising. We'll go into this a bit more in a minute with regards to strategic planning, some of the thematics, the pillars that we're focused on for Moab. I think a question that we get quite a bit is press release distribution. When is a press release worthy? Um, it's a complicated question, depending on what the subject matter is a lot of times. Typically, press releases are reserved for hard news, announcements, things that maybe are more news oriented as opposed to like an individual story like we're focused on, where you're telling an individual story to one person. If we want to get news to a lot of different media outlets, typically we use a press release. If you talk to 10 different people in the PR industry, something that a lot of them talk about is the press release dead? The reason they say that is because it's the opposite of tailored pitching. Media don't typically get a press release and turn around and write a story about it because they feel like it's not tailored. If it's gone to 1,000 people, why should I write a story about it? And so there are ways to garner news around press releases. If it's big news like e-mountain bikes, I think those are things that are worth writing press releases around, but it's case by case basis. What's new in Moab? Alyssa, did you want to talk a little bit about how you own that process and why what's new is so important?
Yeah, absolutely. So we took an initiative to compile a story sheet about what's new in Moab for 2026. We had reached out to over 200 business contacts in the Moab area, ranging from lodging, dining, outfitters, retail, and some community partners to really gather information from them directly of what they're planning to do for the new year. And then we use that information to compile I think 4 or 5 page story sheet that is really easy to digest for media that we can send out to all of our IMM contacts and just anyone that we're talking to throughout this year. And we can also pull specific activities from it or updates from it when talking to media directly about a storyline they might be working on. It was a really helpful initiative for us because a lot of times the news that we're getting is, directly from Mick and Allie. But we really wanted to dive into some of these businesses directly to see what maybe they're working on that hasn't been made public yet that we can take advantage of and share out first. So that's been a really powerful initiative and something that we're planning to make a regular thing throughout the next couple of years. And we are happy to share it out if anybody's interested in seeing it, or for the next round, contributing to it. We'll make sure that you're on the email list if you didn't get it the first time.
Yeah, and one of the reasons what's new is so important is the first thing that a journalist always asks us is why now or what's new. We could have an incredible story idea, but if it doesn't have what we call a news hook or something or a news peg that has something to do with current events or trends, or there's not some reason to write about it right now, a lot of times they're not interested. And so we're constantly trying to create news when we have none, or find a way to tell a story in a relevant way to now. And so I think a lot of times when we send out these emails, we do get questions back about, why do you need what's new? Like, why does what's new matters? It's because it's the question we get back from journalists all the time is, why should I write about it right now? I had mentioned, and if there's any questions on that, please let us know. I know that that's always something that people have questions on. Why does it matter that it's new?
Yeah,
Yeah.
so just going on that, one of the things that we talked about earlier was just kind of more Grand County or Moab's history with adventure, right? Like, I mean, we were one of the first places that you would go four-wheeling. We were one of the first places that whitewater rafting was taking place. Some of the climbing that was taking care here was very early. The mountain biking on the Slick Rock Trail was one of the first. So we've been the first in that. And so, when you're putting that into what's new, I'm just wondering, are you looking at and responding back to that to say like, what's good? Right? Like you're saying, what's new? This is what's good. And then when you're asking those businesses, are you asking for those milestones? Right? Like, hey, this is 30, because I mean, as a business, you're not really thinking that, hey, I've been in business for 20 years offering this tour. And this started off as, a little niche, and now it is mainstream awesome. Right? Like, have you tried anything that's like this, what's good?
So
Yeah. Oh, go ahead, Alyssa.
Yeah.
I was going to mention the outside accessibility thing too, but go ahead. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is just one PR initiative. I want to just note that first. We're always making sure that we're highlighting the history of Moab and the businesses that have been there for a long time. But we're also asking in our submission for content to these businesses if there's any milestones that they're, celebrating that year, or any increases in trends that they're seeing, or increases in customer base. And we're including some of those stories as well as look at this business that's been here for a long time. And what's new for them is that they are continuing to grow and continuing to gain traction throughout these years. Or maybe they have a big celebration this year that we can highlight. So that way we're bringing in both the new, actual openings and then the new news around these businesses that have been here for decades.
Yeah, and Brian, oh, go ahead.
No, you're good.
Oh, I was going to say it's a really good question, and it's an applicable example I can offer is, and Alyssa hit this on the head, is micro trends or just things that businesses are seeing in the consumers and the travelers that are coming to them sometimes inspire a story. And so like an example of that is we had interviewed Faith Dickey, who owns Elevate Outdoors. And we had simply asked her that question is, who are the people who are coming on these highlining tours? Has it changed over the years? Or is, this sounds pretty extreme adventure. And much to our surprise, she said that her business model had really shifted in the last couple of years with regard to accessibility. And accessibility is also a major trend that we're seeing editorially. People want to hear about how people are doing interesting things. They may be visually impaired. They may be deaf travelers. They may have spinal cord injuries. And she said that she had adjusted her business to this. She had taken a woman out highlining who had a spinal cord injury. And she had adjusted her whole business plan, how they were going to do this, how they were going to get across this high line. When they got to the other side, it was a powerful story. They both hugged and cried together when she got to the other side. And we were like, this is kind of fascinating. Do you know other business owners in Moab who were also focused on accessibility? And she did. She had given us some names of some others. And then we ended up sending out a story query to other guiding outfitters if they were seeing this as well. And we heard back from Carl at Red River, Mike from Big Iron, and several others. And we ended up pitching that story to Outside Magazine about how extreme adventure in Moab has now become accessible to everyone through the guiding community. And Outside got back to us, and this is a good example of pitching the outlet and the person that you feel like is perfect to tell a story. And she wrote back to us in like 3 minutes, the head of travel and culture at Outside, and she was like, "This is a perfect story for us." And then she wrote back, I'll be back in touch. And then she wrote back 2 minutes later and she said, don't send this pitch to anyone else. We want this story. This is our story. And it ended up being this huge feature that included all of those guiding outfitters around accessibility. And so I think it's a good example of it could be just the consumers you're seeing or slight shifts in your business, or, seasonally we're seeing something different, or we decided to offer night tours on the river. We've never done that before, and it's been a huge hit. And so it's sort of little micro trends. And I think some of it too is we would rather be killed with news as opposed to the opposite, where we feel like we're in a vacuum and we're not hearing news. And so if outfitters are doing something, or restaurants or hotels, or you're hearing something in town that you think maybe there's a story idea there more than likely is a story idea, and we do want to hear about it.
So getting on that, so when you were going through that, did you end up including Explore in that article?
I don't think so. No, I think there were 5 outfitters in that story. And we've talked to Mick and Allie about this. Part of our endeavor is to spread the love, check the box. We got you covered, and then move on to the next group of guiding outfitters so that everybody is getting included in these stories. But they were not included in that one that I know of. No.
Yeah, and so, just on that right there, I mean, so that was a great opportunity, but I think it was also a missed opportunity right there. So knowing that we actually have an outfitter that is exactly what they cater for, is to accessibility, right? Their whole business, both here and in Salt Lake, is geared at that, and they've been offering that for 30+ years, right? Like and what I'm getting at, I'm not just using this as an example, but is when we're driving that traffic, I want to make sure that when you drive it, that you drive it to the places that are going to be able to best handle that business, right? Because if we drove this giant news article, and Faith Dickey's business is now inundated with folks coming in, and she's changing her business model to do this. That's great, right? Like I'm totally stoked. I think that's a fantastic job. But also we have somebody already set up. I mean, they have all of the vans that are already conditioned to take people out to places. Their boats and their guides are already trained to provide services for these kind of folks right here.
Explorers.
What's that?
Explorers.
No, Explore.
Oh, sorry.
Explore.
Yeah, and I think
National
Ryan-
Mobility.
But
So-
the thing is that the story with Faith was new, it was new and different,
Yeah,
and the
but I'm
National
so
Mobility
tired
Center.
of everything only having to be new and sexy.
I know,
when
but
people
that's
have been
journalism,
doing this. Why can we not?
Well, that's PR. We have
There's
to play
also-
into what people are looking for, and also every story isn't going to be a golden goose. I would love to do a National Mobility Center story, and we totally will. But Outside Magazine and Faith Dickey was the perfect story, and so we can keep going, and we definitely will.
And we also met with people at IMM
Yeah,
I'm
who are
just
going to
I'm
do
just-
more.
yeah.
Yeah,
Like I
I'm
think
not
that was
at-
one story. Yeah,
Right.
we're working with BBC right now on a similar
Yeah.
story about accessibility, where we're able to include a bunch of other outfitters as well. We also just worked on a story with Foders that will include visually impaired outfitters that are able to give access to them as well. And so, Brian, in terms of those stories, there's layers to that. That's one story, but that's also a story that we don't get to just tell once. Fortunately, we get to tell that one over and over again. And so there is opportunity to continue to get those layers of outfitters covered who are catering to accessible groups. And we'll get into it in a minute as well, into our strategic messaging pillars, but accessibility is one of our always on storytelling focuses. And so that's not something that we're going to stop.
Yeah, no, I think that guys are taking this as a criticism. It's not a criticism at all. I'm just
no.
saying that when we're doing this stuff as well, let's make sure that we're looking at, you have the story, the Faith Dickey story that kind of came out, and that's your driving headline right there. But as those, folks are like, hey, what are 4 other businesses that we can mention or highlight in this link, right? I would say that something like, making sure that you have the National Ability Center kind of listed right there. So
Sure.
that people know, like, hey, for something like this is an outfitter that's been around for, so many years doing this. It seems a shame not to mention them when we're going in. And like I said, I'm not focusing just on this one right here, but just kind of carrying that into future stories as well, to make sure that that not only are we highlighting the new business and the new thing, but that if you are going to be looking back, let's make sure that we're including some of those, I don't know.
Yeah.
Foundational businesses that have been here for 30, 40, 50, 60 years.
And I hear
Yes.
Lori's point too, that, this happens in global markets where tour operators are constantly like, what's new, what's new?
Yeah.
And it's not just, we have a new hotel, we have a new restaurant. But I think a little bit of what you were describing, Campbell, is we can, work with a historic guiding company and find a story that hasn't been told. And that could be something that new. Somebody could be doing something for 30 years and that could connect with a trend, and you could make that connection and that could be new. So it doesn't, and we don't always have to be talking about literally what's new, but looking, reading the zeitgeist and trying to pair these things together.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, you hit it on the head, Mick, right? I think there are so many nuanced ways to shed new light on some of the people, places, establishments that have been there for so long. And so some of the questions that Alitza is sending out, for example, are meant to mine for news that we can ultimately pull into trend stories or seasonal stories or whatnot. And we're really looking at how do we look at different facets of what a story could be so that we can represent more Moab businesses and partners more often, really is what it's all about. It's not just, hey, a new restaurant's opening or a new shop. It's really about the layers and how things are evolving as well and growing with the community.
Yeah, and I think layers
through the presentation, but one other point that you made, Campbell, was that Allie's tracking our coverage. So when someone gets something, we have a scorecard so that we kind of have an idea of the landscape, so that we're spreading the love and looking for stories for everyone, for the whole.
Yeah, and then we have priority list, for this year of who wasn't covered in 2025 and things like that.
Yeah, and then the only other suggestion that I'd have with that is just, let's just make sure that when we're putting these stories in, to think of the size of the story and the capacity of the business that we're kind of like highlighting.
Yeah, that's
let's make sure that we're matching those, a New York Times article with, that we're driving that traffic to Moab. That's going to be, that we're going to be able to support it.
And Campbell, correct me if I'm wrong, but journalists look at this through an ethics lens too. No journalist wants to blow up something that can't sustain it. And then all of a sudden, where they just put a spotlight, it now isn't the experience that they were describing. So they're weighing these things too. Like, is this, we have a big audience, and does this deserve that visibility?
Yeah, and journalists too, we pitch them a story and they research it themselves. They're not just copy pasting what we give them. And so they're reaching out to businesses too and double checking and making sure that they want to include it. So
yeah, I mean, I think it's a really good point. I mean, the pitch and the story idea does have to align with reality, especially if somebody is coming and doing that story. Like the person who wrote that outside story came, interviewed those people, did it, and so kind of saw those people in action. I also think another component too about that's worth pointing out is that was a story query that we sent to every single outfitter in Moab, and we utilized the ones that was responded to us. And so a big part of this, we gave everybody the opportunity to respond, and we pitched every single outfitter that did respond to that query within that. And the ones that responded were all included as well. Tandem-based Moab was also included. And they're also doing another bigger story on them. And so I think it's a good reminder. And I think as we have more success with these stories, that we want these stories to be shared so that people are encouraged to say, I want to get in touch with Camp Stories because I want this story told. And so some of it, I think, is seeing the stories that we've done and encouraging others to come forward with those story angles and respond to the queries that we send.
Yeah.
Campbell, you mentioned that you're sending this to all outfitters.
Mhm.
I'm just curious what list you're using. Is that from like the Discover Moab?
My list.
And can we look at that? So
Yeah,
we
I
can
keep
see
it updated. Yeah,
Yeah,
there's like
check it out.
80 guide companies on it. And it's all the guide companies that respond to us. And it's on our leads list. So if you get leads every 2 weeks, you're on that list.
Okay, so they have to subscribe essentially to.
No, I'm keeping up all the time, like keeping track of guide companies and reaching out to them. And so then anybody who reaches out to us to get listed, they're automatically added to that list. So we keep it as up to date as we can, but people do have to reach out to us and be on top of it.
Yeah, and to respond to us, we want, like, we would love to have a 100% response rate. And we do have some people that didn't respond before and have become very responsive, which is really helpful for us, just as because we're also building itineraries that I mentioned earlier, and so we're going out to outfitters, restaurants, et cetera, to try to build those itineraries. And so it's a great use of time when we're having people respond in timely manners to those.
Yeah.
Campbell, do you want to
definitely.
touch on IMM?
Yeah, so I had mentioned this a little bit earlier. So IMM, it happens every January in New York City at the Javits Center. It's 400 plus DMOs, destinations from around the world, and thousands of journalists that come. And I had mentioned it's speed dating. You preference with these people. It's like a dating app for media. You have to preference with them and they have to preference with you. And we met journalists from everything from the New York Times and Wall Street Journal to Foders and Outside Magazine. And you
And
get
Allie came with you.
Allie came with. It was amazing. We sat at a table together, and you want to crawl into a dark room at the end of the day and not talk to anybody because you pitch people for 15 minutes, 24 people each of us, so 48 total, with unique story angles for each of those people. We love that event because it really lines up press opportunities for the year ahead. Most of those people were really interested in Moab as an adventure, an outdoor destination. We did pitch that accessibility story as well. We pitched the national parks, astrotourism, night tourism. But I think one of the most surprising stories for most people was film tourism, which we'll talk about in a minute as well. And then also downtown Moab as well, the shops, the maker scene that has emerged as well, and the restaurant, the F&B scene that has also emerged there. And so we actually were able to meet with quite a few journalists from Food and Wine and Saveur and Bon Appetit. And so a lot of them are really excited about the F&B scene in Moab. That's something we have not seen written about ever before. We've made inroads there and we've had some great success already, and we're excited to have more success in the coming year.
Hey, Campbell, just so we know, like, what other destinations attend IMM? I know that it's vast, but
Yeah.
could you list some people that stuck out to you, especially people like
Sure.
competitive sites?
Yeah, Utah
I know
was
Utah
there.
State was there,
Yeah, Utah Office of Tourism was there. Deer Valley was there. Colorado was there. Nebraska was there. At the continental level, Tourism Australia, California, Brand USA is there as well, which represents everybody in the United States as well. And so basically every big destination marketing organization goes to these things. It's not the kind of thing, unfortunately, where you can sit and present the same story idea over and over to the same people. We put an enormous amount of research into all 48 of those appointments. We come up with specific story ideas. We know their outlets before they sit down. We know the last couple stories that they've written as well. We know where they're based, so we know what their access is to Moab. Typically, we look into their travel schedule. We look into their social media networks as well to ascertain whether they've been to Moab, whether they've covered Moab before. And so an enormous amount of prep, but you get out what you take in. And so we have a number of those people already who are interested in coming to Moab or who are already writing stories from the event.
Just for my knowledge, do you guys, would you mind doing a quick little mock of how one of these pitches goes between the two of you? Because I mean, I'd really be interested to see. Like, I mean, I've been to tons of travel shows and seen it, but I've never seen a PR pitch.
Yeah.
I don't know, Campbell, are you able to do that with either Allie or one of your crews, just to kind of?
Yeah, we can always
show
put
us
Campbell on the
what it
spot.
really is like. I mean, I understand, the speed dating kind of aspect of it, but but go right ahead. I mean.
I don't understand the speed dating aspect, so you're really gonna have to break it down.
It's like IPW.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was just kidding, actually.
Yeah, I caught your joke.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So Allie met with somebody whose name is Graham Heemstra. He's the
Mhm.
publisher and editor-in-chief of an outlet called Field Magazine. Field Magazine is really interesting because it is kind of the opposite of what's going on in news media right now. In news media, it's a little bit doom and gloom, as you guys have probably seen. We heard that the Washington Post laid off about 30% of their staff last week. A lot of travel sections are unfortunately shutting down. Wall Street Journal got rid of most of their weekend travel staff and is rehiring new staff. Graham's model is kind of the opposite of that. He started it as a digital site. If you're not familiar, it's fieldmag.com. It's focused on outdoor adventure, good design as well. And it's a perfect fit for Moab. And so having that background is kind of what you go into. A lot of people go to IMM and they waste the first 5 to 10 minutes asking them, what are you excited about? What do you know about Moab? Who do you write for? We went in with that all ready to go. And so Allie went to Graham and she said, we love Field Mag. It's a perfect fit for Moab. Here are the story ideas that we have for you. As you're testing gear, as you're sending people around the globe to sort of test gear, Moab is a perfect backdrop to do that. We're also looking at potential brand partnerships with them as well. They do really interesting things with brands like Hoka, with Nike ACG as well, where they're testing these things in the field. And so, Allie, I don't know if you have other things to add as well. I know that was one that you owned and you were also really excited about.
Yeah, it's mostly a conversation.
Mhm.
They know that you're pitching them stories, but it's you want to give them like the inside look or something that's really specific. So for Field Mag, it was gear testing. So we showed like visuals, like here's what your gear testing could look like, because the print magazine is gorgeous. And so
They
you
just came
know,
out with a new print magazine as well. Like it was a digital only site, and now they're printing this incredibly gorgeous like coffee table magazine.
yeah, so it was photos of the landscape that we have in our shared media library. And then he's also really into kind of like off the grid adventures. He's written about backpacking and gravel biking and bike packing. So I pitched him on covering our gravel adventure fields guide when that comes out, and the figure 8 loop that you can do in Canyonlands National Park with your pack raft. I also pitched him on Cataract Canyon rafting and how the boat ramp is getting fixed, and also Cataract offers an interesting hook to like climate stories, and connected him with, like maybe he could try to get on a returning rapids trip or something like that. Gear testing in the desert, running ephemeral creeks like the Muddy, and then we ran out of time.
Cool. Yeah, and I just wanted to kind of hear what that
Yeah.
conversation sounds like.
Yeah.
'Cause, I mean, I
It's
think that's
fun. And sometimes it's really
fun.
nerdy too.
Yeah, mostly for Field Mag. I've been following Field Mag since I was in high school. And so I was like, I love Field Mags. This is really great. Moab is beautiful. When have you been to Moab last? I noticed that you wrote this gravel biking story. You should do this in Moab. I noticed that you've been doing this field testing. You should do that in Moab. Just things like that.
Okay, so yeah.
For anyone who hasn't
Sometimes
seen
it's really
it, that's
specific
what
too.
I'm talking about.
I just pulled it up.
Yeah, look up Field Mag, and then like Kendall said, it's almost like a magazine that you keep as a book.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So our visuals track with their design aspirations.
Yeah. Oh,
it's a
local
good-
guide profiles. I encouraged him to reach out to local guide companies and see if they had like a character, because they love these like portrait photos. And so, we imagined this really gorgeous like portrait series of local guides.
Yeah, and then Brian, a lot of times we come with really specific angles, which journalists love. They appreciate it a lot. An example, I met with Lynn Brown, who is the travel editor at BBC, which is a big outlet, obviously, and one that we want to attract to Moab. And one of the stories that I had ready for her, because they do a lot, there's a section in BBC Travel called The Specialist. The specialist is somebody who knows some version of a destination and can offer like a behind the scenes insider look. And so the specialist that we suggested to her was Biga from the Film Commission. We're like, she's perfect. She is the one who plays host to stars that come to Moab. She helps people choose where they're going to film. And then, of course, the news hook there is it's not necessarily new. It's that it's the oldest film commission in the world and that she's never been covered before in this capacity from a travel standpoint. And she loved that story. Another
Yeah.
example is I met with a guy, his name's Jesse Scott. He's a freelance writer. He does a bunch of celebrity coverage. When you read a celebrity interview in Travel and Leisure, he's typically the guy who does that interview. And so we also talked to him about film tourism, but we also noticed when we were studying his background that he's a huge coffee fiend. He's very into good coffee. And we believe there's an incredible story about coffee in Moab. In a lot of small towns, coffee is not good. That is not the case in Moab. Moab has better coffee than a lot of big cities. And so we talked to him a lot about coffee, and he wants to come in a few months. He's doing an RV road trip. He's being hosted by RV America. And they're coming through Moab. And so he wants to do a story on coffee and FMV culture in Moab when he's there. So that's fun.
Campbell, do you want to talk about pitching Kathleen on the e-bike story too?
Yeah, so we also met. It was an opportunity for us to meet with Kathleen Relihan. She is the travel and culture editor at Outside Magazine. And it's really funny. She must really enjoy our pitches because typically after you write a story, you wouldn't meet with that person right away because it's kind of a waste of a slot and they are coveted. But she met with us and she was just telling us how much she loves Moab. And we had a bunch more ideas for her. We told her that we want to be on best adventure towns, best family towns. They do all these best lists. It's really important that we get Moab on those lists, back on those lists. We talked to her about e-bikes as well. We basically told her that we felt like Outside was uniquely positioned from an authentic standpoint to cover this story when it breaks on March 1st. And part of the idea we had was she said she had two editors.
Wait, Campbell. Sorry, Outside is going to cover the e-bike story anyway. So we were like, we should at least try to pitch them something so that we can get our voice in because there's no way they don't write about it in March.
Yeah.
They've always had that story. I mean, when I look at it, they started the story in 2014 when there was the ban on e-bikes.
Right.
So they have a continuing story that kind of goes with that.
Totally. So we were like, we need to like pitch something so that we at least try to get our voice in when they cover this again in March.
Yeah, and we created a little bit of tension too, which some outlets is like, okay, like that's interesting. You're not the first to introduce e-bikes, but tell us about like what's going on there. And we had done really deep research and we found that two of her editors, Outside owns Velo News, and the editor at Velo News was very for e-bikes. And there was another editor who had written less positive story about e-bikes. And we said, you should write a story where both editors make a case for e-bikes and use Moab, the news, as the catalyst for this story. And so that's what we've been talking to them about is you should cover this news in a way that just talks about the dynamics around e-bikes and how Moab is a leader in this space. And so we're also pitching that a lot of other places, but we felt like that would have been a really cool story for Outside. And we're waiting to hear whether they go with it. But as you guys saw, we also got a couple other big e-bike stories confirmed in the meantime. Sorry, that was a rabbit hole, you guys, but hopefully that gives a little bit of sort of a peek at how excited we are about telling stories and kind of how we do it.
Yeah. So FAMs and media visits, I know we talked about this a little bit more earlier, but just to dive into it, FAMs are familiarization trips. So that is when a media journalist comes to a destination and really experiences it firsthand, goes to different dining options, has lodging accommodations, and we really customize an itinerary that's fitting for that person's interests, their abilities, and their storylines. So like Campbell said earlier, no two itineraries are the same when we're building out these FAM trips for them, but it's a great opportunity for media to come and get that firsthand experience to be able to write those really in-depth first-person stories that are the great feature placements that you'll all see. So that's part of, what FAM trips look like. If there's any questions around those or how you get involved, if you would like to be involved in any of them, please let us know. It's a big big part of what we're doing over here for securing stories.
And then Court, do you want to talk to activations quickly?
Yeah, I mean, I think activations are an amazing example of when and how we can bring some of the storytelling that we're doing on the day-to-day basis to life in a tangible way. So much like you all are familiar with the festive tree, that's essentially, a representation of a messaging pillar that we want to get across, right? In Moab, we celebrate the land and we have a reverence for the place and the people in the community. And so we're going to light this tree in only a way that could happen in Moab as almost a quiet contrast to what happens in some of, the larger celebrations like the Rockefeller tree, et cetera. And so we always, through a full year, like to look at activation possibilities, right? So what are the ways that we can bring stories to life in a new and interesting way, in a tangible way, but in a way that is interesting, unexpected, and or newsworthy, right? Because there has to be a hook so that we can share this with all of our media friends and say, hey, like, look what's happening in Moab in terms of this activation or how we're doing things really differently and uniquely. And so, and we'll get into our 2026 plan, but as we're building that, we're thinking about, what are the right opportunities for activations? And from there, we'll think about thematically or seasonally, where do we really want to heavy up, or where do we want to pull through some of the key messaging? And is there an opportunity for us to develop an activation that really brings that to life? So we can get into that when we're talking about the planning. But we really like that because it's another layer to how Moab is walking the walk, essentially.
And Courtney, for somebody who doesn't know what PR teams refer to as activations, I'm trying to think of an example. I know the state did their In Love in Utah campaign, and they did an activation, and this might not be accurate, but it'd be an example of an activation where they rented a storefront in downtown LA, and around Valentine's Day, they were giving out candy to consumers. It was an opportunity to connect with consumers in a particular neighborhood and get the idea of a trip to Utah in that kind of community. So they were giving something away, engaging with consumers in that way, and creating something that's kind of newsworthy in a way that goes beyond pitching just to journalists. It goes to something where the PR team is coming up with something where they're kind of creating news. I don't know if you have other good examples of
Yes.
activations.
Yeah, and I think also, there's so many different ways to look at activations, but essentially, it's taking a story and activating it in a unique and different way. And so the example that you gave, Mick, is, a consumer-facing activation, and that's certainly a possibility. Whether you have an event or a street team or do something grassroots where you're connecting with consumers to get your message across. And then there are also media activations where you're putting on an event or something for media specifically, or you're connecting with media in a unique and interesting way. And so I know Campbell has some great examples of some activations, and
So Courtney, in that example of a media activation, Washington County and Zion went to New York City, rented a dinner space. It's called the Light Box, and they projected pictures of Zion all over this dining room table, invited influential editors, and just so that they had a space to have a conversation about stories in Zion. So only journalists would have been invited to that. And it's what Courtney's describing as opposed to the consumer-facing activation. Yeah, Campbell, do you have a favorite activation that's a good example of something that really worked?
Yeah, I mean, I think as Courtney mentioned, there's levels to these things, and whether you're looking at a consumer component or whether you're talking about media component, typically depends on sort of the budget involved. Two that I've done personally and led were most recently we did SODAC in Soho, which was where we activated South Dakota in Soho in New York City for 3 nights. We rented a space, Prince Street Lofts, which was multifaceted. It had an outdoor space that was tented indoor as well. And then we brought makers from a bunch of different pillared areas within the destination. One was indigenous tourism, one was music, one was culinary, and we invited media. It was not a consumer-facing activation. It was for media specifically. And we gave media the opportunity to go in, pass through, and basically we created a South Dakota immersive experience in New York City. Media could gravitate to sort of where made sense with their beat, what they wrote about. That was an enormous success as well. And then a few years ago, I put together an event called Houston on Houston, which was very similar, where we rented a 3-story house on Houston Street and popped up Visit Houston in the city. And it was a similar kind of thing, demonstration kitchen in the middle of it. So as people are coming in, there's past hors d'oeuvres, there's music happening, so ambient sort of noise around you, and then makers throughout the room, and people talking about their crafts as they're doing it. I think for Moab, there's certainly the capacity to do something with guiding outfitters, with the F&B venues, and certainly with makers and shops as well, where we pop this up. I think it's always a question of, do we want to do it in Moab and attract people to the place, or do we want to go to a major market and bring the idea of Moab visually and physically to a group of media in a major place? But in terms of ROI, it's always been very strong. Typically, you have almost 100% return rate on everybody writing stories about it as well. I also think it's great from a partnership standpoint because those people get to go interact with media directly, and you're giving them the tools to interact with media in the future and sort of show them how things work as well. You're also doing a blitz typically when you go to those markets, where we're making appointments with morning news shows as well, so that you're bringing them to do those things also. There's simpler activations as well. We do a lot of mailers also, where we put some of the things that we're talking about into a beautiful mailer, typically a wooden box, and we do an unboxing session with that person. We don't just send it and have them unbox it. Typically, I did one for Visit Nebraska, where it was during the pandemic, and we knew a lot of families were home, journalists with their kids, and they were looking for things to do. And so we had several naturalists put things into these boxes. One was like owl pellets, things from sandhill cranes. As they unboxed it, we encouraged them to do it with their families, which I know they all really appreciated. And part of that pillar was talking about family adventure and visitation to Nebraska. And so all of it ultimately ladders up to strategic pillars and the stories we're trying to tell.
Campbell Brian has a question.
Yeah.
So a couple questions, and I'm just trying to understand this as it went with the festive tree. You know, because that was the activation we had. That was our activation. And so in that activation, there were a couple of things. There's there's the partnership that we had with GoPro, or Goal Zero, right? And so that was part of it right there in the actual event of having the tree lit and things like that. And then you had a activation, as in you brought in media, right, to write stories about this, correct, prior to that?
Satellite media.
Yeah, satellite
Yes.
media too, right? And then we also had a paid advertising that went along with that as well,
A
correct?
little bit.
Yes.
Yeah, and then we also had a little bit of a paid advertising. So
That was
This would be an example of like, we created the tree, right? And you were telling people to go see it and visit. So there's a little bit of consumer to it. I love the festive tree. I went multiple times. It was very, very fun. But we also targeted journalists. So they use this as a news hook to say, hey, look what this community is doing. We actually provided the news in the form of a satellite media tour, but then also pitched people so that they would write about it. So it's kind of hitting all of these different ways that you can launch activations. But you're right on. That's exactly what was going on.
So, just the only questions with that is, when we look at the ROI on that, what were the number of stories that were written?
I think
we
you
have
guys
that.
We
have it. We're going to get into, we have a whole results.
Okay, perfect.
We have 2025 results.
Yeah, that would be great. I just wanted to go into
Yeah.
that real quick. I have one more just little small question with that.
Yeah.
Are you coordinating with Madden on the areas that they're actually focusing? Right, so
Yes.
the target areas that Madden is focusing on, we're making sure that we're targeting those areas if we are going to be doing an activation, correct?
Yeah. And I think
Yes.
we'll get more coordinated as we continue to work together.
Perfect.
We've been doing this for 6 months, right? Camp Stories signs on, Madden signs on, Camp 4 is on, Jessica's on the call. And I think we'll
Yeah.
get even better at all of this stuff, communicating to the community, setting our goals, etc. But yeah, we definitely aspire to coordinate.
And an interesting component of that, that's a really good question, Brian. And I'm glad you brought it up. One thing that's interesting when partnering with Madden on things as well is there are some markets, depending on size, scope, where it doesn't make sense for them to advertise or to invest in marketing in those markets, but they might see something interesting, an uptick or aspirational audience in those places. What we can do through PR is go into those markets, pitch stories there, see what the reaction is. And oftentimes, if there is an incredible reaction, they can go in with advertising dollars after. And so it's kind of, we look at it as a stool with legs supporting the stool, and everything supports the stool and plays off of each other. If you take one away, the stool falls over. And so we kind of look at it as we can test in these markets.
Great.
Yes. So with that, typically at the outset of, every partnership and every year we develop a strategic plan, and it starts as a strategic framework. And that's where we start to compile all the different story angles that, we might go through in the messaging pillars. This is a question for the team because I feel like we've actually covered a lot of the story angles that we're already talking about. So we can go through this, or we could pause and get right into the 2025 coverage, just since there was some interest in that. Do you guys have a preference for where you want to go?
I'd like to see the results of what you were able to do, just.
Yeah, let's do it. Okay, perfect. Alitza, do you want to pull up our 2025 report and we can kind of shift over there? And then if there's additional time, we can always go back to our strategic framework, but keep in mind that when we're delivering a strategic framework, we're essentially continuing to build on that throughout the year. So we're focusing on building an editorial calendar, and then some of our key messaging. And then we're thinking about what could some of those activation overlays be. So there will be more opportunities too for us to share some updates on what we're planning for 2026. So with that, Alitza can go into the 2025 recap and we can show some of the coverage.
Sounds good.
One moment. I have
And we
to...
love the questions. It's much more fun when there's a banter.
Yeah.
Courtney, it looks like I have to restart my Zoom to have sharing capabilities. I'm gonna drop it in the chat. Can you pull it up? Sorry about that. It's in our Teams messages.
Oh, it's
Campbell, do you want to pull that up?
Yeah,
Or, and Alitza, if you want to restart, do you want to drop off and just join us back and we can answer a couple questions too?
Yeah, I can do that too.
Happens. Let's do that.
While that's happening, I probably ask my two questions.
Yeah, Brian has some questions about 2026.
Yeah, 2026, and just making sure that they're in there. I just want to make sure that you guys are prepared and ready for how we're going to be instructing our visitors to visit Arches this year. Once that decision is made, I'm sure that that's going to be a very popular hot topic on how visitation in Arches is going to be ready. And I just want to make sure that you guys are poised to have, you said that you select people for these stories. I just want to make sure that you have somebody ready that's going to be able to be the authority. One of the things that I got worried about when I saw the $100 increase into Zion and Bryce is the AI writing was out of this world, and the fear mongering that came in on that was really bad press everywhere. And I think that it was because there wasn't somebody who came right out front and said, I am the authority, this is where we need to be at. And so I just want to make sure that you guys are ready to handle that story when it does land.
Yeah, it was
That's a
really
good point. Something that Campbell was talking about. Sorry.
Oh, good.
Sorry.
She said it could have been a positive investment. It came out as a negative.
Yeah.
And valid.
It's really why we want to invest in having PR representation. Campbell, feel free to answer with your thoughts on that. One idea is to issue press releases. When we were talking about press releases, one thing that they can do is they orient journalists on who to go to write their story. So we can position camp stories as, announcing that the Park Service has done this, and then journalists, as they feed that into their stories or write about it, even if it's a small part of a bigger story, they know who to go to check to make sure that their information is accurate, et cetera. Campbell, I don't know if you have other ideas of it should be, I hope it comes soon. I mean, it's already 2026. I hope it's coming any day now.
So even before that, I mean, yes, we have the sources, but we can plan our messaging way,
Plan the messaging
Before
before, and
that.
so,
Yeah,
you
but
know,
we
the
need to
way-
know what it is.
no, you don't.
Yeah.
I did this all the time for emergency management PIO stuff. You plan for
Yeah.
all these different crises scenarios and you have a template. You don't know who's going to get shot, but you have, sorry, that's a really good
No, it's
way to
okay.
go, but
It's really.
it's where you plan the messaging template. So you have something to go off of and then you just.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
basically, if I was looking at this, I would be thinking that we want to make sure that communications with the national parks is once this decision is made, that you guys will get a notification of exactly how that information needs to be communicated to guests. And that you have a spot on your website ready to go where you list that out right there. And then Campbell would be using that to say, this is the authority right here. And so we need to make sure that we're pointing at Discover Moab, because I think that is our most authoritative spot right there, right? To say this is where that information can be found. And then also pointing to the National Park Service's website and saying, this is where that communication can be found. Because however it comes out, right, that's not as important as just making sure that we're telling guests, right, exactly, this is the information that you need to know for 2026.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So we already
that's my
have,
goal.
we already have this, we have this in
Yeah.
place now.
Yeah.
As soon as we get it, we'll update it.
Yeah.
I think Cora has some ideas of how to push it out. Campbell, do you
no.
have any ideas of what we could do to prepare for this news?
I mean, we've had discussions about this previously, and I think it's probably a broader conversation because there's a lot of entities involved in information gathering and information sharing for Moab. And I would agree for the national parks that there needs to be one place where we're guiding people with messaging. But I also think from a PR and crisis standpoint, because we've done a lot of crisis communications, it's really important that we have delineation of who is responsible for what and who is able to talk about what. Journalists will, and they do, will call until somebody talks to them. And if we don't have a chain of command of who is responsible for what, they're going to get 10 different stories from whatever 10 different people want to talk to them. And that's not just the national
Just so
parks,
we
that's
know, just
any.
right now, the person to talk to is the National Park Service. So they will issue what timed entry looks like for 2026. And for example, last year it was going to be from April to this month, stop and then pick it up. That's the direction that consumers are looking for. When do I need a timed entry ticket and where do I go for that? Like Brian said, we link to the Park Service page so that they can get the rest of their information. But in terms of
Service has not done a great job communicating, and I'd rather that you're the person of contact.
Right.
Personally, I think you're gonna do a better job teasing that out, because the Park Service doesn't really have a dog in the fight as much as you do.
Well, I guess it would be Melissa Jeffers thing.
Well, there you go.
Yeah.
And I guess, I think what you're describing is something like when we, and this is something that our office has done. When we hear about timed entry and you get timed entry ticket from this date to this date, somebody says, well, what happens when I go to the site and there's no ticket? And we can have a sort of public facing message that is, what our office says is you should absolutely book your trip to Moab. You can always go to Arches.
Right.
You can always get in before 7. You can get in after 4 as the current thing, so that we're encouraging visitation. And I think your point is that the Park Service isn't going to take up that extra lift to think from the consumer's point of view.
Yeah.
They kind of have a different mission, and we can absolutely, we do that and we will do that as we think about whatever.
And whatever they come up with, it's gonna be fabulous. If it's this, it's great. If it's this, it's great. Come to Moab. If this,
That
come
is,
on, like you said.
Yeah.
we are 100% aligned with that. Our job, we look at it is to manage expectation and experience, and whatever happens, we want a place where people can go and they can plan and they know it. We don't, if there is a timed entry system, the last thing we want is people saying, I didn't know there was a timed entry system and it ruined my day or it ruined my trip. If there isn't, then we also want to manage that. And so, I mean, I think a simple FAQ
I'd like to
also.
pause there just 1 second there, Campbell. So if there's not, right, and I think that's the thing that I don't know if we are preparing for,
That's what I'm.
right?
I'm
So
prepared.
I know, I know you are, but I want to make sure that when going back to the $100 little investment right there, or the not investment, but the $100 charge at Zion and Bryce, right?
The messaging
The
surrounding that.
messaging that surrounded that was wrong. Arches, Capitol Reef, we got thrown into that messaging through the state of Utah. So because the messaging was wrong, right, we got lumped into these stories and then we got dragged into the controversy that surrounded it. It also created a lot of confusion, which we tried to undo. And once that damage is done, there's no coming back from it. That's why when we find out what's going on, we need to be prepared with this messaging that we want our visitors to know.
Totally.
And we need to make sure that that messaging is matching with the state of Utah. And also, if, you know, I don't know how the Park Service is gonna be putting that message out,
Right.
but we want all of those three things to match so that the authority says, this is what you need to know.
Yes.
This is the controversy.
Yes.
Right? Because we don't want the two of those. And what happened in the Zion and Bryce is the two of those got put in together and nobody knew what to do. And then everybody else was getting drugged into it.
Yeah, to be
So,
fair, that was
yeah.
sprung on all those entities without
Totally.
any notice, so they were all scrambling, and that's why that happened. Everyone will be happy to know that I wrote the Park Service this morning to check in on when we're gonna hear about this. And so that contact is made, and you know, we hopefully we get that in advance of any sort of release. But to the extent that anyone on the board or anyone in the community hears of it, we would like to know as well, so that we can be prepared, just like I said. So
Exactly.
we can work with whatever we're dealt.
And it's good to hear that you guys have that framework ready to go so that when that story does come out, that you have the mode of transportation to get that message.
Yeah, if you guys want to go on discovermoab.com right now, we have all that info about like timed entry has not come out yet, you know, plan your trip. And so if you want to look at that,
Charge at Arches.
yeah,
Mhm.
look at what we currently have and then suggest changes. You know,
No, I think that's fantastic. But then also, how does that play in with camp stories and how they're going to, you know, find the person that's ready to tell that story and make sure that it's going to be that authoritative voice that says, this is what you need to know.
Yeah, I mean, it's developing by the moment, obviously, but you know, people like we know outside's going to cover it. You know, and we're in touch with them directly. We know SF Gate's going to cover it. We're in touch with them directly. And Brian, you mentioned the UOT. We are lockstep with UOT as well, working with them and Anna and their comms team, because if it is about national parks as a whole, it's important that we refer that to UOT as opposed to messaging on our part. I know we also talked related to this as well. Activations are really sexy and amazing, etc. But I mean, when we're talking about dollars invested into things with ROI, I think media training is something that is probably also worth looking into in a crisis comms plan and making sure that everybody is prepared in advance for whatever comes their way. And they feel like when the camera gets into their face, they either know to politely decline and refer to the right person, or they know what they're going to say there. And so, I mean, I think that's something that also might be worth looking into in 2026 is media training widely, not just at Discover Moab, but within the board, and so that everybody feels like they have the tools that they need to deal with these things. And I don't know whether that's taken place in the past, but we would recommend it. We work with a producer from the Today Show who comes in with cameras and assistants and puts together, typically she can do it in a day, but it's usually 2 days where she puts everybody through their paces of what media training looks like. And everybody that comes out of that feels really ready for whatever could come their way. And then the other component of that is the crisis communications plan. We have a mold that we put together. We put one together for Monterey County in California, where I don't think they had the highway fell into the sea, and they had, you know, hurricanes and fires, et cetera. And so it's just being prepared for anything and everything and making sure that we have a plan and that there's no rogue actors. A lot of times you have emergency responders that end up in front of a camera and they say whatever comes to mind. The other downside of a natural disaster situation or a crisis situation is often what happens is news media swarms in when it happens, and then as soon as it's over, they swarm out to the next one. And so it's important that we have a plan after it happens of here's the recovery, here's what it looks like, and no, don't cancel your trip. Or if you're planning a trip, still come and making sure that we're communicating either affected areas or what this looks like. And there's a bunch of different ways to do that. But we're also working with Karen Hanker, in touch with her directly at NPS, who's been really helpful. And so, but yeah, I think it's being lockstep. If Mick is the guy to talk to that as soon as we have those news, it's having those pitches ready to go. But also reactively as outside SF Gate, et cetera, reaching out to us, LA Times last time as well. Some of those we referred, as I mentioned, up to the UOT, knowing what we can talk about, where we're able to talk about those things directly for our parks, and kind of owning that messaging. Is
I
that
think the
helpful?
messaging also needs to be a little bit, to Cora's point, like, we have to have the pitch ready to go for reservation or no reservation, and how exciting both of them are. Basically, like,
Yeah.
now the dates are open.
Yes,
The
yes.
dates are open, you can now reserve, but also tailor to different market. Like, the international market is a big deal because they plan 6 months in advance, at least.
Mhm.
a minimum. And so making sure we have the international market as a completely, probably different message, because, and having that list of people ready to go, because those tour operators, those people, they plan so far in advance, and so making it exciting either way.
Yeah,
Yeah.
or like want solitude while hiking to Delicate Arch, try these times instead.
Exactly.
Yes, yeah.
So
Exactly.
Yeah.
despite
If we have
the
that
kind of entry,
ready.
that's what I'm talking
And we're
about.
saying, it doesn't matter if we have timed entry or not.
Yeah.
But leaning into those,
Sorry,
the times when you know you're gonna have a better experience.
Mhm.
And it's already in. it's
Highlight
already
the
written.
sunrise, you know,
100%.
that's always going to be.
And that's exactly
Perfect.
what my family did. They're like, they didn't have a reservation. I said, go at 5. And they on and on and on about how fabulous that experience was going at 5. That was so great that I'm like, oh, they were gonna kill me.
Yeah.
But they loved that whole, oh no, it's gonna be great. And if we're ready for it to be great, no matter what happens, I feel like we really need
Yeah.
a solid.
If you make it
plan.
sound great, it will be.
It's
Yeah.
gonna be
Our-
great.
Our rec-
We'll work this piece.
You know.
We'll work on this. It's important.
Yeah,
It's important.
I would say an FAQ either way. I mean, what people are going to ask for also is,
Yep.
do you have a web page? Do you have an address where I can send people? We can talk all we want, but you can't publish an interview and most of the things we're talking about. And so I think it's really key. Lori makes a great point is, let's put this stuff somewhere on a web address where we can guide people to the right information. And then it becomes a really easy response for everybody.
Mhm.
Because you're right, Lori. It's like,
You made a
even
few
if you
other
don't-
points about crisis communication generally. And, again, we've been working with Camp Stories for 6 months.
Yeah.
These are all things that bubble up for us, and we're like, we're so grateful for this support. We've also talked about community communications plans. Like, what is this board's role? Like, what is our office do for the community? Like, so much gets lost in those conversations, and setting up a communications plan and executing it through the media is something we can aspire to. Campbell, in your example in crisis communications, when I first joined the office after the flooding, I noticed there was a lot of coverage of the flooding in Moab. And then, like you said, the news media left and they never followed up. And I had personal contacts saying, can I come to Moab?
Yeah.
And the answer was, you could have come the next day, right? Nobody should have canceled their trip because of that. And certainly it affected our community and it was a very serious issue, but it wasn't cause to cancel a trip. But the news stations that were covering it in Southern California didn't do the follow-up. And so that's something that we could do and is important to our office to have those communications where they do the story that, Moab's okay, right? So that people keep coming. And that question mark weeks after the fact, weeks after the event is it a disaster zone? Is it not? And so these are the things that, our office will do and we'll work with Camp Stories on to get better coverage of all these things.
Yeah, and breaking news lives on sensationalism. And so I think that's something to keep in mind as well, especially in terms of measured response to these things. And yeah, quickly turning around and making people feel good about, I'm still going to come, don't cancel your trip. I think that's the key.
Yeah.
here.
And it didn't happen. It didn't happen. So that story didn't get told. Did you want to?
Yeah, no, just as long as, I think that we really need to think of it as two separate pushes, right? There is there's the dealing with the sensationalism that's going to be involved, but then there's also just making sure that we have that truthful message. And sometimes those two can kind of, because we're trying to sell people, you're trying to get them to come. And so sometimes your truthful message becomes a little bit sensational. And I think with this one, we want to just make sure that we're having, we're letting our guests know, like, hey, this is what you can expect. And that would just kind of be my recommendation.
Yeah, and it's probably a good segue into just perception and how we either harness or we're affected negatively by perception. And I think this Wall Street Journal story was a good example, is managing people's perceptions of seasonality. And it's the same thing with the national parks, is either way it goes, it's managing what happens and how you're going to have the best experience and how we're here to help you have the best experience. And so I thought this was a good example of, yes, it's hot in Arches National Park right now. Here's why you should go anyway. And so, Alyssa, I don't know whether you wanted to, I've had these on the screen sort of scrolling through some results here, and I can scroll through, but if you wanted to quickly touch upon some results from the year, and then we can go into the festive tree, holiday lights press recap as well.
Yeah, if you want to scroll all the way to the top really quick, there is a graph there that just kind of shows coverage over time. We're making sure that coverage is regularly coming in. Again, we started working with you all in May, so you'll see the first stories coming out in June. But we're making sure that there's a continuous flow of these big feature stories that are going to be continuing throughout the next year and focusing on Moab. So that's really important for us to make sure that, we have that consistently coming in and it's not just during peak seasons. And then go down
One thing you pointed out to us was, as our office is going through this, was you guys are only reporting on stories that you pitched and were involved in.
Correct.
Like we said.
Did he freeze or did I freeze?
I think they froze.
Oh.
That's weird. Oh, we got you back. You guys.
Okay.
Yes.
I don't know what you heard about what I said. I was just saying that these 22 stories are stories that you directly pitched and were involved in getting placed. If somebody sees a story, it doesn't necessarily mean that Camp Stories was in touch with that journalist. But we're grateful that we do have that support so that journalists know who to reach out to and to try to shape what we can. But
we're really careful about claiming the stories where we've directly been involved. I think some PR agencies, it's a bit dubious where they'll claim anything that comes through. And so we want to make sure that our efforts are shown accurately, authentically through what we're doing on behalf of the city. Some examples of trips here. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Alyssa. I interrupted you.
Oh, no, it's okay. I mean, you're scrolling through, so it might be easier for you to actually walk through them, but just some big features that we want to highlight. And Campbell, if you have a couple in there.
Yeah, this Afar Media piece came out. It is highlighting the museum, the Moab Museum, which is really cool. The news hook in this case was America 250 celebrations, and they have some incredible things going on at the museum. And Diego is actually very good at sending us information, which we appreciate. And so making sure that we're mobilizing that for stories and telling those stories as well. The Backcountry Festive Tree, this was an earned opportunity as well, where we had pitched somebody on this. Utah events as well, highlighting everything going on from the holiday season, festivities holistically. Again, a bunch of holiday events. This was part of the story from outside, talking about just guides and accessibility, which is a pillar of ours as well. This was a story that was focused on hotels. We're trying to tell hotel stories. A lot of people that we're in touch with seem to think that you have to stay in a tent. If you come to Moab, that is something we'd like to dispel a bit. It's kind of interesting. Dark skies, astrotourism is something we're constantly talking about with media. It's a fun thing to pitch. We feel like Moab is one of the best places in the world to do this. This was a really cool story in Sierra Club. This writer actually ended up writing 2 stories, and she has another on the way. about Moab. One was for National Geographic, which is really cool. Um, this is also a really interesting one. This is where we work directly with John Meyer at the Denver Post. John Meyer wrote me after this story and said that Governor Polis in Colorado, because of this story, found a way to open national parks in Colorado because Utah had done this, and he wrote this story. And so, fascinating backstory there on sometimes how news media affects things. It was great. It was very positive. It was like, why can't you open our parks? Utah's doing a great job. You should go to Moab. They're still open. And so that was a big win for us. This was another one nationally as
You're getting
well.
thanks, Campbell, in the room. People are
Yay.
We're working hard.
saying thank you.
Yeah. This was nationally, our national parks closed during the government shutdown. This was a good example. Brian, you mentioned like being ready. This was just us being ready, and good communication from the UOT that the parks will stay open. We'll figure out a way to stay open. And so we were able to get into this story as well, making sure that people know that they are open. Fall travel as well. This was a broadcast earn piece, which was really cool in the Florida market, where they were talking about fall travel, places to go for fall. This is the big Wall Street Journal piece, which I'd mentioned as well. This one was interesting too. We pitched a similar story around hot temperatures. Also, this popular national park destination is offering serious summer deals. The idea that like it's hot, you should come anyway. We were in Moab in July, and I think I've never been in the height of summer. I think it was the best trip I've ever had to Moab. It was amazing. Mick knows we were in the river for a little while. We were in pools, and that became the inspiration for a bunch of editorial stories. So this was a good one as well. Also, Condé Nast Traveler. Really trying to work our way into a lot of these big national outlets so that we're being included. This was a great one. There were a couple F&B ones I did want to highlight.
Can we get a copy of this deck? Because
Yeah.
I can't.
Yeah, it's actually a link.
We can
So-
send it. We'll send a link to everyone so they have this. This one was really cool as well. This was restaurants and meals worth traveling for in 2026. This is exactly the story we want to tell. We did not find many examples of Moab restaurants on lists like this. And they included the birds, which we're really excited about in this story. And also when we send you the link, these are all scrollable, so you can like see all the stories and everything in one place, which I think is really helpful. I think they included birdies in this one as well. And so yeah, a lot of cool stories there. And then there are questions about festive tree and holiday lights press recap, which we also have. Alitza or Courtney, do you want to speak to this? I know you guys were very involved in this recap.
Yeah, something I want to note also that you'll see in the impressions here, that was 22 articles secured earlier. Those do not include the efforts that we're gonna go into here with the festive tree. So these are additional efforts. We had put together the SMT that was shared across broadcast. Campbell, if you press that little expand button at the bottom of the SMT report, scroll up a little bit. Do you see that little bottom
This?
left? Yes, perfect. That might make it a little bit easier for people to look through. But this is definitely a great recap of our work with Jennifer Broom as she explored Moab and highlighted a lot of different activities in the area seasonally, both seasonally and year round. She had coverage in all of the top markets that we had identified and really targeted each one with specific messaging. She had written out a script for each one that was for that destination. So it was not very key cutter repetitive for everybody. It was really.
Lisa, can you explain how this works a little bit? So she was at the Hoodoo Hotel, and she would be called into a news program and then would do a description. Can you tell us just a little bit about the process?
Yeah, Courtney, do you want to jump in there? Actually, I think.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so when we build a satellite media tour, we typically have a story focus in mind. In this case, we use the festive tree as our hook because it was timely and related to the holiday season. So while the Rockefeller tree was getting decorated and covered all the time on the Today Show and NBC News, we wanted to promote this amazing holiday activation that we were doing in Moab, which really spoke to the soul of the community and how we do things differently, right? We're rooted in stillness and thoughtfulness and reverence for the land and guided by, some really unique principles, right? So this was a really nice kind of tension point that we were able to play up, but it served as the hook to then getting longer stories and more coverage about the place holistically. And so what I mean by that is we work with Jen Broom, and then we identify, hey, what are the markets that would be really priority for us to go into? And with that, we are referencing, like we said previously, some of the media markets, for example, that Madden is prioritizing. So there's a lot of cross connection over the strategic planning here. And we're looking at, what are the right direct lift markets? What are some of the bigger aspirational markets? So you'll see that we included Chicago, LA, New York, just for the eyeballs and the coverage and the sheer awareness that we can drive. Really, the goal here was to have the word Moab, Utah, in the news. How do we socialize that word? How do we make sure that people understand what this place is and how dynamically beautiful this place is also? I think something important for us all to remember, and sometimes we have to remind ourselves of this, is that Moab is not necessarily universally known. I think there are a lot of people that know exactly what it is and what it looks like, but there are a lot of people that do not, specifically maybe in some of those major coastal markets. And so we led with this news hook about the festive tree. And so Jen Broom came to the Hoodoo, and she basically tapped into on-air segments in 16 plus different markets. Can we pause on this?
Yeah, where do you want me to go?
Anywhere.
I don't know where to go.
You can go to the market. You can go to the markets. And so
This is why you don't want me to drive this
yeah,
thing.
stop driving. And she tapped in to each of these. So to Alitza's point, basically what she did is she authored a script in collaboration with us. We helped guide this on, what do we want her to say to this particular audience, knowing that if it's a market that is a drive market, right? So that we can encourage people to get in their cars and drive to Moab. That script might be a little bit different than a script in New York, where we know that requires a little bit more travel. And what's happening in New York, the Rockefeller tree. So everything was a little bit tailored to that. Ultimately, the strategy here was get in with the news hook, talk about the tree, show the tree and how absolutely beautiful it is and why it's interesting and why it's a contrast to what's happening with, a Rockefeller type celebration. And then talk about, hey, in the winter, here's what it's like in Moab. It's actually, warm, sunny afternoons, beautiful to explore. And then we expand beyond that to talk about a 4-season story. This is where we have an opportunity to show the cinematic beauty of the place. So that's where we're showing these just gorgeously shot landscapes. For people who don't know what Moab is, we're really helping them visualize and understand that, oh my goodness, a place of this magnificent beauty exists. We're also showing some of the activities that can happen year round. So, horseback riding, getting on the river, hiking, biking, you name it. We're talking about those things. And then we're also expanding into the town of Moab and showing images and drone footage of the town, and then going deeper into some of the shopping, the dining, the coffee, and all of those different facets. In some cases, we had up to 4 full minutes in these markets. And that's when we talk about these layered, really rich stories with incredible depth, because while we're hooking them with the tree, we're able to expand into a larger story about Moab. And when it's the holiday season, you have a lot of families coming together during that time period and thinking about, what are we going to do next year? What does our trip planning look like? And so it's really good opportunity for us to get into the homes of these people via broadcast to talk about and remind them or introduce them to Moab, show them beautiful, stunning visuals, and, maybe put a bug in their ear to plan their trip to Moab. So this
That's
here
great.
is,
Thanks for
Yeah.
explaining that. So these shows were running.
Yep.
And then they cut to our talking head and ran
I watched a few.
4 minutes.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to ask if you guys watched them. I can always pull them up.
Yeah, I
but,
watched
yeah.
Oh, good.
the same format, but it was very, it showcased Moab very well.
Compelling.
Yeah,
Good.
there's
And so what were some of the results?
Yeah,
How many
let me.
people donate? There's a good results page there.
What were our
Yeah.
results? 164 million potential audience.
Yeah.
So we had a lot in the way of broadcast impressions and digital impressions. And with this, we also put out a press release about the festive tree, as well as the complimentary holiday activations happening, or holiday happenings happening in Moab. And with all of that collective reach, as well as some of the earned media hits that we got, we calculated 164 million potential in coverage. So again, this was really an awareness play. How do we get the word Moab out there? How do we remind people that know about Moab to think of us? And or how do we introduce Moab to some of those kind of more expansive markets on the coasts?
Yeah, and essentially it was unique messaging for each market, which I think is important, as opposed to just like a canned message for each one. And so that's one of the things we like. We choose somebody who knows the subject matter when we do these. And Jen Broom has been to Moab many, many times. She's based in Denver, and so she was able to talk really naturally about what she has done in the place. And then she touched on a bunch of the pillars that we have in our strategy court, which we could run through very
That's awesome.
quickly.
Brian has a question.
Just a quick question. You guys have this on the plan for 2026, right? Because at least for our local markets, right? Denver, Salt Lake, Grand Junction, right? To make sure that we're gonna be hitting them up, especially since we already have the imagery ready to go, and then we can move into our holiday season for
It's a little
2026.
bit TBD. We're still
Yeah.
talking with the team about what to do.
Mhm.
Should we do the festival?
Let me cut out.
We lost them again.
That's weird.
I know.
Yeah, we
Wanna go
just have a
back a minute?
few more minutes. I think we've covered a lot of ground here.
Yeah.
But do you want to answer Brian's question about activations in 2026?
Yes, I'm sorry, you guys cut out again a little bit for me, but I think I heard him say, do you guys have this on the plan again for 2026?
Well, we budgeted for activations in 2026. And
Yes.
so his question was what
No,
what
no,
are we gonna activate?
What are we going to activate? Yeah. So,
Adam?
I think it's a little bit up in the air. We're incredibly pleased with the success of the festive tree. I think we have several groups, schools of thought happening, right? The reason why the festive tree works is because it was a little bit unexpected and it was something new and different. It doesn't mean that it's not something that we could do again. It certainly could become, a community standby to celebrate the holiday season. And is there another news hook that would benefit us greatly? And does that take place in Q4? I think we should be looking, across the full span of the year at what are those opportunities and what is going to generate the most success for us from a news standpoint so that we can gather coverage. We do have the footage.
Another question, Courtney. Brian,
Yeah.
another question.
It's quick, yeah, instead of a full-blown activation, I'm looking at maybe more just the press release. I think that we want to make sure that we at least are ready for a press release for our Christmas festivals that will be happening. Right, and so rather than looking at, satellite tour or satellite media tour and things like that, I think we want to at least be ready to say, to our markets of Denver, Grand Junction, and Salt Lake City, right? Like, hey, once again, like we already have the imagery. Let's put this up and say, hey, here's the Christmas tree, right? Or the festive tree.
We'll have
And it doesn't even have to, it doesn't have to be the full story, but just to make sure that we're keeping up with that. Because that repetition, there's a lot of value in that repetition. Oh, did you hear that? I mean, I was up there, not every night, but I go up there quite a bit, especially when the bike riding's good.
Yeah.
And I gotta tell you, there was a lot of families that actually, I know that it wasn't supposed to be an event, but there was a lot of people who treated it as an event. And I had folks from all over the place. This one family, it's like 20 people that were up there from Salt Lake City. There was another giant family from Mexico that was here.
I
that
saw
went-
them too.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
love the stories.
Yeah, there was a lot of people that came for it. So I do think that it's something that we want
To
to,
build on.
that we want to build on.
Yeah, I know the BLM was in touch with us and they had ideas to expand on things. Which was funny because originally they were like, we don't know whether we want to do this. And they change that tune a little bit. Do we do
Andrea was also a fan of the tree. I would
Yes.
go out and see her there.
She
I
loved
think
it.
the idea was an easy medium for her. That might be a lot.
Excited about
About
it.
it too.
When you ask questions of the staff, oh yeah, let me tell you about that. So she got them on board.
So we'll circle up and kind of plan for Q4 activation.
Yeah.
In our final couple minutes, we gotta jump here. We didn't think we were gonna take all 2 hours, but of course we did. You guys are talkers, and that's why you're in PR.
Exactly.
Because you're so friendly and so fun to talk to. Is there anything you guys want to say in closing?
No, I
mean-
did just want to add, I think Allie and Mick, you guys reported, and my favorite story about the festive tree holistically is that there were people out there caroling on Christmas, which
Yeah, on
really
Christmas
warmed
Day,
my heart.
holding hands.
I mean, I think on activations too, like, I think we need to be really goal oriented. Like what is the goal? What are we trying to do here? And start with that and then kind of come up with the parameters and the
Yeah.
brief around that. And that's kind of how we look at these things. Like we never come up with like, let's go to New York and do this activation kind of in a vacuum. It's is the goal to attract that, or are we trying to consider like increased lift to the airport from some markets? I think there's a bunch of different ways that we could look at that, and then
Yeah.
kind of coming back at it of here's some things that we think scratch that itch. So there's a bunch of different ways we can look at that. And then we also have we had many other slides on 2026 strategy, I think, as you, Allie and Mick know as well, and we will save those for another time. But we also alluded to a bunch of those things in terms of strategic pillars and storytelling.
Yeah,
Yes.
thanks. Lori has a question for you.
I'm sure Mick and Ally have told you all about this, but there may likely be a story in the fall, which I'm an old airline hag, so for me, it's a story. I read airline crap all the time. We might actually have more options coming into our airport, which I think will make Moab so much more consumable. I mean, I don't want to say that. That sounds so commercial. So much easier to access.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And I think that's a story that we should be watching. We don't know what's gonna happen yet. It's a federal thing, but it's super exciting for me.
Yeah. We
Right.
read the local paper every day online too. And so we see some of that too. And nothing makes us more excited than new access. It also plays into news is the second question we often get, or sometimes the first question after somebody's sold on Moab is, how do I get there? And so, as I'm sure everyone in the room knows,
And the train is.
the train is
having
big
decent
news. Yeah.
to Salt Lake again now. I mean, it's all the way through from Salt Lake to Denver. So anyway, I know you guys know all this, but I have to pretend like you don't.
Yeah, well,
No,
this
I
was
mean,
this
it's
was a
helpful.
full overview of results, what we're gonna do in 2026. We can definitely bring things to the board like our editorial calendar. We'll definitely present activation ideas and run that by the board before we do it. But this was really productive. I hope that even if people couldn't join, if they watch it on YouTube, they get to hear a little bit about what you guys are doing and what you achieved so far. Right.
My favorite part was the pitch.
The pitch. That's our favorite part too. I mean, we love telling stories. Like we love Moab, obviously, and so people are really excited about the place. And so I mean, Allie saw it firsthand as well in New York. I think it's fun to meet with people that have come from all over the world, and they've chosen of all those destinations, 400 destinations, that they're one of their 24 meetings that day, they're going to meet with Moab. And so I think that is a great indication of like what this place is and what we're building. And so we're really excited about kind of where we've come from, what we've built in the year, and where we're going. It's an exciting time. So yeah, we thank you guys.
Thank you.
Well, thank you guys. Thanks for what you do for Moab, and we're looking forward to what's next.
Yeah. Thanks, Jessica Campbell. Listen.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.